Hey everyone, so I'm here. I am doing a video for you tonight, and I've decided I'm going to do a video and maybe a couple others given the situation at hand right now within our nation, I'll say at this point in time. So I'm coming on live or doing this video for you because, as most of you know, there's the pandemic and then also this case of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and a lot of protesting happening right now. Now, I know some of you have seen that I've shared things about Black Lives Matter and that I've done, I've worked with marginalized groups in the past. I've worked in prison ministry. I've done different outreach to different groups of people and marginalized groups of people, including people of color. And so I'm well aware of the struggles in their communities and the issues and the challenges that they've had to face, as well as different things that have happened in their communities in general. So I'm coming on here because of that and that knowledge. But then also I'm coming on because there's a whole new dimension that all of this is taken in. Yes, I've been aware of the George Floyd case, the other cases. I'm also aware of the protests that have happened throughout the nation. And the new dimension that this has now taken was brought to my attention this morning, where I was watching live mass, doing my live mass, because right now in Manhattan and in New York City itself, at least definitely here in Manhattan, we are pretty much still in lockdown quarantine mode. And I'm saying that because we are not fully functioning here right now. Okay. Things are not fully open here right now. And the church is one of those things that has not been open this whole time. It does not open. Our St. Patrick's Cathedral and the churches here in Manhattan do not physically open until tomorrow. Okay. And when they open tomorrow, they're only open for prayer. All right. So no masses have happened there yet. And it's taken us this long just to get to being able to go pray in the church. We've had to live stream everything, as most of you know. So why am I saying this during, all of this? And I'm saying this because this morning, after I watched my live stream mass, I get my daily updates, right? And there's certain things I do a daily update on. I'm not going to tell you what all those things are. You definitely don't need to know all those. But one of those things that was brought to my attention was the fact that vandalism in the form of graffiti had happened to St. Patrick's Cathedral during Black Lives Matter protests. And so, again, this whole thing has taken on a whole new dimension. So I thought, given all of the tumultuousness of this whole situation, I would come on and talk about all of it. So most of you know, like I've already said, I've been present in Black communities. I've done prison ministry, other forms of ministry in marginalized groups, including Black communities, people of color. And there's so many different things that I could say, so I'm just going to ask the Holy Spirit to move through me at this time. The first thing that I'm going to say is that, and as most of you know, what happened to George Floyd is definitely wrong and should not be, the people should be held accountable for what happened, right? That's one of the things. And I'm sure most of you already feel the same way. And then to the protests that are happening, there's a reason why the protests are happening. People are tired of change not happening. They're tired of their communities being the ones who are always in a state of suffering. And then even when suffering is like trying to be eliminated from that community, or when they're trying to be raised up in that community, things like the George Floyd case happens, right? And so it sends a total, it's like an earthquake through the community, especially in that case. So it's not surprising that protests are happening. But then there's also a whole other dimension to this, like I've already kind of said, I think, in the beginning of this video, where now religious buildings are being graffitied or vandalized or desecrated, if that's what you want to call it. And that actually, while it's okay for people to protest peacefully, that is actually, in my mind, not okay. And I'm saying that because no matter what church it is, you know, whether it's a Baptist church, Methodist church, Catholic church, any faith community really should be respected, right? And St. Patrick's has always been there for all the people, no matter who the people are, okay? And so I'm coming on here tonight for multiple reasons. Most of you know that I go to St. Patrick's frequently, like very, very frequently, right? I go there and almost all the guards and police officers know who I am. Every time I walk through that door, they know me. They know who I am. They know who my family is. And I've always felt well protected there, and like nothing would happen to me. And I've never seen any of those police officers do anything to hurt someone or to do anything to harm them when I have been there. And I haven't seen them step out of line. I've seen like maybe 2 things happen where there was a confusion about a new Mass app, okay, where they've said something to people about using their phones during Mass. Other than that, I've seen nothing. I've seen no one come in and try to hurt anybody. I've seen the police do nothing to, you know, nothing harmful to anyone. So no one from the community has come in, and nobody in the community has like come in to lash out, and no one from outside the community has come in to lash out, and no one from inside the community has lashed out at someone else during my time there, and the time that I've worshiped there, and the time that I've prayed there, or all the other times I've been there. So it's a little disconcerting, and a lot of other things right now, to see graffiti on the church given these protests. And there have been multiple protests down here. Okay, this is not the first protest. There have been multiple protests down on 5th throughout the time I've been here. And so to bring a little bit more light to everything, I thought I would help share a couple people's stories, to bring a little bit more perspective, because I know that all of you are being exposed to what the news is sending you. But there are a lot of other different perspectives out there too, in relation to both of those, all of those groups. So not just both of those, not just the Black community and the civilian community and the cop community, or the white community, which is what things have been labeled now, which isn't even, you know, there are Black cops and there are white cops. There are Latino cops. There are cops of every ethnic background, okay? So, and then there are civilians of every ethnic background as well. So I'm just going to share some things and some perspectives, whether they be my own or other people that I know in relation to this who have been in some of those deep communities, to help foster dialogue, openness, communication, and peace between people, to help this to really reach a good place. Because the place that it's at right now, okay, although it's great to have freedom of speech and it's great to be able to stand up for your rights and it's great to be able to protest, we're also still literally in the middle of a major pandemic, okay? Globally, not just in this nation, but globally. And I'm also saying that because we have also seen, and I'm saying this globally because I'm aware, right? Like I have to be aware of these things, so I'm aware of them. We've seen globally a spike, right? I would say a spike in police brutality or abuse of police power for things throughout this pandemic. This is like this occurrence, although it's related to George Floyd and it is a Black member of a community. This is not the first issue that we have seen with police overstepping their boundaries, especially during the pandemic. And with that also being said, we've also seen how much the marginalized populations have suffered through this time. So they're already under a deep strain and a deep hardship, just as everybody else, but maybe I would say even worse in some cases, hardship given the pandemic. And now you're adding this, a case of police brutality and literally killing someone in their community on top of that. So given that, I'm not surprised that there are protests, right? And I'm saying that because I see a lot of people getting upset that there's protests. I am also upset, but I'm not upset at the fact that people are standing up for their rights. That's not what I'm upset about, right? I'm upset about the fact that they've felt the need that they had to protest and it's gotten to this point, especially in the middle of a pandemic, right? So I think there's multiple factors here, and I've just tried to label a couple of them for you. With that also being said, there's a whole other layer to this as well, where not all police do things to hurt people, right? I mean, I think I already presented that in the beginning of this video, where I know certain police officers and the things that they do to protect people in a positive way and do not overstep their boundaries, but are really good and healthy about what they're doing and really try to foster collaboration between groups of people and are really trying to help the people right now during this very difficult time in our history. So with all of that being said, I guess I'm going to ask all of you to just turn inward for a little bit and just reflect on all of it, and what some changes are that we can make for the future, because things can't continue the way that they have been going, right? They can't. They just can't. They just can't. And I think this pandemic has brought that out even more. And so there have been multiple cases, so many cases of this happening in the past. This is not the first case. George Floyd is not the first case. This happens all the time. George Floyd is just one of the cases that made it to the press. Just one that everybody's heard about. there are so many cases that are pushed under the rug that nobody hears about, that nobody knows about, that happen all the time. And they've been happening throughout history. This isn't something that is new, right? And I'm not saying that because of the sensationalism or, any of that. I'm not saying it for that reason. I'm saying it because it needs to stop. It needs to stop. We've said this so many times. As advocates, we've said this so many times. We've put ourselves out there, right? And no, I have not been involved in the protests. I'm a little bit more concerned about safety of people right now not getting the virus. So I haven't been involved in protests, but I have spoken out enough, right? And I have been in communication with other people to help different groups of people to get what they need, or to get, to feel heard or to feel respected, right? And to foster communication between groups, and to really help other people to understand where they're coming from, because I'm really good at reconciling people together, right? So, and reconciling groups and fostering peace between groups. So even in that area, I'm saying it for those reasons. It's time it stops. It shouldn't take a protest to have police respect other people and other people's rights. It shouldn't take that. That should be part of their job duty. That is part of their job. There's no way around that. Their job description includes that. And if it isn't written in it, it needs to be written in it, because that's like a given. So that's just one little piece of all of it, right? On top of the fact that whatever is the difference between the marginalized population and the majority population, that needs to change. That needs to change. The most COVID cases have been found in people of color and marginalized groups. Those are the communities that have suffered the most, where the most people have died. So even in that factor alone, that needs to be looked at. That needs to change. The whole thing needs to change, right? The pandemic itself and this whole situation has brought out major points and factors where the current state of today needs to change, and where marginalized groups have not been treated with respect or valued, or have been shown their value, right? Or have been even receiving the adequate pay that they should receive to be able to provide for their families, or even to have the food that they need to sustain themselves during a pandemic, or to even have a good immune system to overcome a virus if they get it, right? So, let alone a burial place or anything else. So again, I'm going to say things need to change. And although I understand why the protests are happening and all of that, the other layer to this is places of peace should not be vandalized. Places that promote peace and who respect other people's rights, right? And who value all people should not be vandalized. I mean, there's a lot of other places that shouldn't be vandalized either, but I think I've made my point clear. The church is not some place that should be vandalized or graffiti drawn all over it, right? And I'm saying this as someone who has also lived in Boston, and I've gone through, different things there in Boston as well. And I've seen crazy cases there too in relation to the church. But at this point, I'm sorry, I'm not crying. I have an itch. At this point, in the middle of a pandemic, that's the last thing that should be happening. We can barely even get our church open right now, right? It's taken us weeks to come up with a guideline to even be able to do that, to allow people into the church, and there people are drawing all over the church. I mean, seriously, where are your priorities? What are they, and what do they look like? Because that should not be one of them, right? I think everybody needs to do a check-in right now and figure out where they're at and what's going on, and seriously, what they're thinking or not thinking, whether it's the police, whether it's marginalized groups, whether it's people like me, whether it's people in the park, people standing outside of the church, people in the mosques or the synagogues, or people in nursing homes.